What is up? Daniel here with the Virtual Robotics Studio, and we are just about ready to start programming, but before we can, we have to set up our RoboRio, our radio, as well as download the programming environment. So we're going to get to that, but before we do, special thanks to First and Argosy Foundation for making this all possible. Okay, we need our robot. We're going to need a battery for this, so go ahead and put a battery in your robot. We won't need to turn it on quite yet, but we'll need that in a little bit. I'll go ahead and put the strap as well and plug it in. Okay. You're also going to need probably a USB cable, that weird one. It was the printer cable. It's the normal USB on one side and the square shape on the other side. So we need that. That will let us plug directly into the RoboRio. That's the easiest way to get it sort of connected and up and running. You might need an extra Ethernet cable. If you don't have one, we can reuse the one that's in the robot. And one of the most important things you'll need is some way to write a micro SD card. So I have this little USB adapter that will fit the micro SD card when I need to. So that's the little one, not the bigger one of the SD card family. All right. But first, we're going to go ahead and start finding and downloading all of the software that we are going to need. So if you get on a laptop and we want to go to docs.wpilib.org, and then I think you don't have to type the rest of this in. I think if you just go there, it will take you to this page. Now, a couple things to be aware of. It is currently December when we are filming these videos, which means we are still looking at the 2023 version. So you can see down here, 2023 overview. You can, if you're trying to do some stuff early, click on this arrow here and go to the latest, which will give you kind of the 2024 beta versions that are being tested right now. But when you come to this website in January after kickoff, everything will be updated for the new season, so you'll be able to just follow along. Now, the pages may change a little bit, but it's looked very similar for the last several years. So as long as you kind of see where to go here, you should be able to find that spot after kickoff when you're doing your setup. So we built our robot. We kind of have this introduction 0 to robot here. We built our robot. We did the wiring. So the next step is installing software. So if you go to the Installing Software tab, if you are following along with our video, we're going to be doing Java programming, not LabVIEW programming. So we don't need LabVIEW for FRC, but we will need the FRC game tools. So if you click on this, it will kind of take you to another page. You got to scroll down and find the download FRC game tools link. That'll take you to another website hosted by National Instruments, FRC Game Tools, and you can just download it here. Of course, you'll find older versions, and there should be a 2024 version when you come to this website to get it. Okay, so that's done. Then we can kind of go back. The next thing you're going to need is the WPILib installation guide. So if you go there, there is also, if you scroll down, a place where you'll be able to download for Windows. And I think the 2024 version, you might have a few different places that you can choose to go and download. So just click that download link wherever it takes you and download that file. Then, if you go to preparing your robot, we have one more download that we want to do. And I want to get all the downloads done first because at some point our computer is going to connect to our robot instead of the internet. So it's nice to just have all the files done and installed before you get started. So the last one is in step 3, preparing your robot. We're looking for programming your radio. In programming your radio, there is the FRC radio configuration. The version may change, but right now it's 23.0.2. Of course, if you're in Israel, get the Israel version. They have some slightly different rules about what wireless stuff is allowed. But for everybody else, just get the FRC radio configuration. That should take you to just a straight download link, so you can download that as well. Once you have those 3 downloaded, just go ahead and run the files to install the software. I'm not going to do that because I'm using the 2024 beta versions of stuff, which is a little bit more complicated. I'm jumping through a few different places to find and get the latest versions of that. So it'll be more confusing to follow along. But for you, it should be nice and simple. Everything is right there. Okay, once everything is installed, so take a minute, install all of them, then we should have a bunch of icons, shortcuts on your desktop. And I guess I will show you one thing. So for the WPILib install that we looked at, when you run that, you do have one option that I'm aware of. The other ones, I think you just say yes to everything. In this one, you mostly just say yes to everything, but there's one point towards the beginning where you can choose like to download for here. So if you start it, you can do for just this user or all users. I usually pick all users. Then this next one, you probably want to choose the top left corner, which is download for this computer only, which is the fastest. You need to be connected to the internet for that. But this will get everything you need without having to worry about like saving another file and going back and running stuff. Obviously, we can't skip and don't use VS Code. That's not going to be what we want. So start with that top left one, and it'll do some downloading, and then it'll run through the rest of the installer. You just say yes to everything else at that point. OK, so everything is installed. We have, like I said, on your desktop, you should have WPILib, 2024 WPILib VS Code. You'll also get documentation and tools. You should also have, from the FRC game tools, when you install that, you should have the driver station, FRC driver station, and RoboRio imaging tool. And then the radio configuration utility will create a file that looks like this when you extract it. OK, so if we go back to our WPILib page here, and we go back to preparing your robot, the next thing we have to do is basically put new firmware into our RoboRio so it's ready to go for the season. And there are two different types of RoboRios that are out there. There is the RoboRio 1 and the RoboRio 2. If you are a rookie this year or last year or I think the year before, for a few years, you would have gotten the RoboRio 2. If you are a team that's coming back and you haven't been doing this for a while, or you're a team that's been around for a long time and you're reusing your old RoboRio, you might have a RoboRio 1. If you're not sure, you can tell by looking at your RoboRio. If it says on it, so inside here, if you look at your RoboRio, this one is labeled RoboRio 2.0. So if it says RoboRio 2.0 here, you've got a 2.0. If it doesn't say that, you've got a 1.0. So it's actually pretty simple to find out. Also, in the 2.0, there is a spot over here, which is our SD card slot. So we actually are going to need to push down on that and pull out the little SD card that's hiding in there. So we're going to need that for the RoboRio 2 setup. OK, back over to our computer. We have the options in preparing your robot for RoboRio 1 or RoboRio 2. You can always click on the link to it. And their instructions are here. We're basically going to be following these instructions. There's one more piece of software that we have to install, though. So you can see you can get other SD cards. You can have backup SD cards. There's some tips and tricks. This is reminding us where to get the firmware. But once we get the firmware, we have to write it to our flash drive. And they suggest using one of these two pieces of software. You want to use either Balena Etcher or Raspberry Pi Imager. Now, I've always done it with Balena Etcher because it was the first one on the list here, and it seemed easier to click on. So that's what I'm going to use. It works well. I've never had a problem with it. So go ahead and click on this one, download and install Balena Etcher as well. And you can do the download here, and then go ahead and install that file while you're at it. OK, and once that file is installed, that's the first thing we're going to run. So I'm going to look for Balena Etcher here, and I'm going to run that. This one did not put a shortcut on my desktop, so I'm doing this, running it from the Start menu. OK, and so this says we're going to flash from file. We don't have a URL for it, and we're not going to clone a drive. So we're going to end up doing flash from file, but we have to find that file first. And, of course, we have to plug our micro SD card into the computer. So I'm going to use that little, SD card reader that I've got here. And this one, for me, just plugs in the corner. So find something that you can use to plug it in and plug it into your computer. So now that SD card is connected to my computer. And I don't know why, but it shows up with a lot of these errors saying you have to format it. Basically, just if you get these, just cancel all of them, make them all go away. We're about to take care of it. OK, then to find the file, because when you choose flash from file, it's going to be like, OK, what file do you want? In order to find the file, what we want to do is run our RoboRio imaging tool on the desktop. There's this icon here. So if you run that RoboRio imaging tool, Did I click on it? There we go. And it might take a second to load, obviously. OK, this is going to pop up, and it's actually going to start looking for RoboRios. Now, I'm not plugged into the RoboRio. My RoboRio is not turned on, so it's not going to find anything. But we can't really do anything until it's done. I guess you can kind of click on some of these buttons, but what we're looking for is to click on this SD button in the corner here. It looks like a little folder picture. And if you click on that, it will pop up a folder. But like I said, I don't think it's going to pop it up until it's done doing its initial search here. So we just have to be a little bit patient. But that folder, there it goes, it popped up, will show us where, I didn't really mean to minimize everything else, will show us where our images are. So when I click on that folder, you can see there is a RoboRio image here, but then inside SD images is going to be the one we want. So this one I think is for RoboRio 1.0. The SD images is the one that we're going to want to write to our flash drive. Now, there's a couple different ways you can do it from here. You could copy this file to your desktop or something, somewhere else you can find it. I like to just, if you click in the address bar up here, you can actually just copy that address. That will take us as a direct link to the folder. Then when you click Flash from File, you can actually just click up here and paste that in and press Enter, and it will take you to the folder with that image. Select the image then, whether you did it this way or put it on your desktop. Basically, find that file, say Open. Then it wants to know the target. So this is what are we going to write to. So click Select Target. You should see micro SD, generic micro SD, or some sort of SD showing up. I don't know why it shows up as drives F, G, and H, but it does. And there is a hidden one. This is like the drive, my system drive. So if you see system drive, do not pick that. So check the one that is the SD card, and then say Select. And then just click the Flash button. And if it asks you, should I be allowed to do this, say yes. And we're just waiting, so it's going to decompress, and then it's going to write. This is going to take a minute. If things pop up, you can continue saying cancel. So I think after it reconnects, Windows is still trying to open up the flash drive. So we just let that go. Says it's going to take another 20 seconds. While that's running, though, if you have a RoboRio 1, what you're going to do instead is use the RoboRio imaging tool that's here. And you would just do Format Target. So once you're connected to the RoboRio, you would make sure that this is a 2024, the correct version, and do Format Target and click Reformat when you're connected. We're going to have to connect to it in a second, so you'll be able to see a little bit more of how that works. Now, there is in the rules an image version that you need to be using. So it is possible that you download the game tools really early in the season, like maybe you download it on kickoff day. There's a chance that there might be an update before your first event. So keep an eye on that. One of the things that you'll see during the year is you get team updates. So first we'll send out these updates with updated information for teams. And one of the things might be there is a new version of the game tools that you have to install. So if that's the case, you'll repeat this process with the new version. That happens occasionally, but not every year. All right, so we are done now flashing. I got to close all of these things. So I'm going to click the cancels and the OKs again. Hopefully your computer doesn't do this. I don't think this always happens to me, but it is happening to me right now. So it looks like it's on finishing. So we're not quite done until it is finished. So we'll just be patient and wait for that to go. All right, and now it says flash completed. So now we are done with this etcher tool. So you can go ahead and close the etcher. And then we're going to pull the micro SD card out. And this is going to go back into the RoboRio. OK, and I think it goes this way. Nope, it goes this way. Yeah, so it kind of won't go in the wrong way, but if you're looking for the right answer, the copper traces will be facing towards the Ethernet, and then the front, the writing of the card will be facing towards the power and CAN wires. And you got to kind of push that in, and then you got to get, I don't know, I try to use my fingernail, because you got to push it down far enough that it clicks into place and stays nice and flat. So once you've got that clicked in, go ahead and turn your robot on. So we'll see, remember pushing in on the side tab. You'll see lights start to light up. I've got a voltage on my PDH All of my Spark Maxes are blinking and all that. They've got their lights going on. And then I'm going to take that USB cable, that square one, and that's going back into the RoboRio. So there's the one port over here that is the square port. So we'll go ahead and plug into that. And I'll feed the other end out here. And this has to plug into my computer. So we'll have to get a little closer. See if I turn this a little bit more, maybe my computer will sit on the table here. Yeah, that just fits. Okay. Okay. The next thing we're going to do, so we're plugged in with the USB. I recommend using the USB cable for this. It seems to have the best record of connecting and not having any disconnect issues or other issues while using it. So on the computer, we still have this RoboRio imaging tool opened. If you didn't, reopen it, the RoboRio imaging tool. And we're going to click rescan, because now that our RoboRio is turned on, the lights on it are actually solid now. So I have solid green for power and nothing's blinking. That usually means it's booted up, it's ready to go. So we'll hit this rescan button, and it should hopefully find our RoboRio. And it already did. So I can see it here now. It's showing up. There is a target. It will be like NI RoboRio 2 with numbers, and there'll be different numbers. You get a different MAC address. There will be an IP there. Basically, when this stuff populates, you know you're connected. If it didn't connect, just go ahead and hit rescan again. Maybe you clicked rescan too quickly and your stuff hadn't booted up yet. Sometimes it just can't find things. If that doesn't work, restart your computer and try again. And if you're doing a RoboRio 1, this is where you would choose Format Target and click Reformat. But because we're a RoboRio 2, we don't want to do that. Instead, we just need to edit our startup settings. Okay, and in startup settings, you need to put your team number in here. And I think I put 9001 on my bumpers, so I'll put 9001 as my team number. Make sure you enter whatever your team number is, though, here. And you don't want to disable RT Startup app. You can enable console out. This can help you potentially debugging stuff or communicating with the RoboRio. It's probably worth checking because it doesn't really hurt anything to check it. But you will probably not use most of the features involved with this. But somebody may be helping you out with your robot and might want this to have been enabled. So I'll check it, but either way, probably fine. And then go ahead and click Apply. And so this is going to basically connect to the RoboRio. It's going to update the team number on the RoboRio and just make sure everything is sort of set up and ready to go for us to start programming it. And this will take a little bit of time. OK, and when you get the pop-up, the RoboRio image was successfully updated, then you're good. But it is warning us that we have to deploy code to use the robot. There is no code on the robot. All we've done is set it up so it's ready for us to start using. So we'll say OK here. We can now close the RoboRio imaging tool. We're done with that. Also, you can unplug that USB cable that we just plugged in. So I'll take it out of my computer, and I'll take it out of the robot. Now, if nothing goes wrong, we should not need this cable again. If something goes wrong, we might. So we'll keep it nearby. The next thing we have to set up is our radio. So the radio, it's just like a wireless bridge or access point. It lets us connect our computer wirelessly to the robot. Or when we're on the field, it lets the field connect to the robot so that we can have 6 robots all playing at the same time. Now, on the radio, so the radio is kind of buried on this other side here. And we zip tied it in, so we're not going to be able to take it out right now. But on our radio over here, we are plugged in already with an Ethernet cable. But the issue here is that the Ethernet cable is our power as well. So if I unplug this Ethernet cable to plug my other one in, it's not going to work. So we have a few choices. One way that sometimes works but not always is that the radio power module over here, that has a wire going in and then that white Ethernet cable going out on the other side. If I undo the cable that's going in from the NI RoboRio side, I can take my external cable here and plug that in. So this is the one that I'm going to run over to my computer. If you do not have an extra cable, what you can do is unplug the the side that's in the RoboRio and plug that into your computer. That's a little bit harder though, because we zip tied it up so it's nice and neat, so your computer might have to sit inside the robot while you're doing that. And if your computer does not have a Ethernet port on it, in the kit of parts there was a USB hub that had extra USB ports, but also an Ethernet port on it. So if needed, get that out and use that as your Ethernet or network port. My computer does have an Ethernet port, so I'll just plug right into that back here. And what we're going to do now is open the FRC radio configuration ... utility is what it's called. So double click on that. And it will give you this thing like, do you want to allow it to? Yes, we want to allow it to. And it's going to pop up, and it's going to ask you to pick what thing you want to use. Now here's what's confusing is there are lots of things that it can choose from, and it does worse when it has lots of options available to it. So I'm actually going to say cancel and let that close. We're going to do one more step before we actually run that. If you find your wireless network, or your network icon down here, if you right click on it instead of left click, like left click will give us the menu to find other networks, but right click, we can choose Open Network and Internet Settings. And that should take us to a page that looks something like this. Even if you're, I think I'm on Windows 10, even if you're on Windows 7 or 8, it should be similar. We're looking for Ethernet on this side menu, and we're looking to change adapter options. Change adapter options. And this is going to get us this window. This is the window we want to get to. Now, what we want to do is there is one Ethernet network port that should show up here. And so this is mine, the Ethernet one. We want to disable everything else. So my Bluetooth is already disabled. It's probably, if you have Bluetooth, you probably want to disable it. And then the Wi-Fi, I'm going to right click and disable. If you have any other Ethernet things showing up here, you're going to want to right click and disable those as well. So we should just have the one thing that's active. I'm going to leave this window open because we're going to want to come back and re-enable stuff after we're done and after this has worked. All right, now we're ready. Reopen the radio configuration utility. Say yes. Now when I do the pull down, there is only one Ethernet port, which is nice. That's kind of what I want to see. So just pick the one Ethernet port that shows up and say OK. Now, here's where it may or may not work. We're about to find out. First, put your team number in. So I'm doing 9001 as my robot. You don't have to put a robot name in. That doesn't really do anything. You don't have to check the firewall. You can leave the bandwidth limit, BW limit checked. We might need to load firmware. In fact, we probably do. And then over here, the radio type. If you don't know what your radio type is, it's almost assuredly an open mesh. If yours looks like the one that we've been building with, it's the open mesh. If you have a really, really old one, that might be one of these other two. And you can choose whether you want to do 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz. If you have 5 gigahertz on your laptops that you're going to be using, choose 5 gigahertz. If not, choose 2.4. 2.4 gigahertz, there's a little bit more like devices in that area, so it's a little more crowded. The wavelengths are a little more crowded, so you might have some interference problems. 5 gigahertz is generally better. It's also more data can be passed through. So even if there are more devices, it can handle more devices in that area. So I'll switch mine to 5 gigahertz because my laptop does have that. And then we can, you know what, since if you have a brand new radio, we're going to try to load firmware first. If you don't have a brand new radio and maybe you used it before, you might be able to get away with just configure. But let's do load firmware. And this is telling us that after you click the load firmware button, it wants us to plug the radio in, we are, and then it wants us to power cycle the radio. So I'm going to turn my robot off, and then I'm going to turn it back on. And that's it. So we power cycled the radio. So this firmware thing has to happen like when the radio is booting up. And so that's why it needs us to turn it off and turn it back on. So we're going to let it go. Look, radio found, flashing firmware. That's what we want to see. That's good news. And so we'll just let this go. Now, if you get an error here, I'll try to give you some things that you can try. On the radio, there are 2 ports on the back, 2 Ethernet ports. We talked about you need to do the one next to the barrel jack. So we went in here to plug in our official cable right? It was the one on the side towards that black barrel jack. You can try plugging into this other Ethernet cable. That has worked for me to flash firmware in the past. I've done that. It works. Not always, but with the radio firmware updating, everything works sometimes. So try that port. That's another thing you can do. If that doesn't work, you might need to try to find a barrel connector to power this radio. So if you could find the barrel jack, and that is anything that matches it. I'm not sure of the actual specs, but if you can find one that powers it, then you can plug directly where the white cable is. Sometimes that helps. The next thing to try is just restart your computer. The next thing to try, if that still doesn't work, is probably get another computer, install the radio configuration utility on that computer, and try again. So there are just some weird things that can end up happening. Okay, so I am at radio firmware flash successfully. Success. Okay, that's great. And you might get that pop-up that's like, hey, do you want to connect? Are you connected to a new network? That's true, because we just flashed the radio and then we connected to the radio. So we're going to say OK. Now that just did the firmware. We now have to configure it for our team. So since we're already plugged in and the radio is booted up, we're going to choose configure. If you do configure and it doesn't work, we're going to go through some troubleshooting steps there as well. But the first thing to try is just to click it again, because if you did not just do the firmware, your radio might not be booted up. And if the radio is not booted up, it takes like 60 seconds or so for the radio to boot. So if you just turned power on and tried immediately, you probably got to it before the radio was all the way booted and ready to be configured. So in that case, just click configure again, and it should hopefully work. If that doesn't work, all of the troubleshooting steps I said for the firmware still apply here. So I'm lucky mine worked this time. I think the last time I did it, I had to go through some of those steps, and I ended up using the second port, and that's what worked for me. But we're done. It says bridge for team 9001, bridge programmed successfully, success. So it is now programmed for my team number, and that is what I need. So I'm going to say, OK, we can now close the radio configuration utility. I can now take the Ethernet cable out. So I'm going to go ahead and unplug that. Well, I guess I'll unplug it from my computer because I don't need it there either. And I'm going to unplug it from the robot as well. So if you remember, I put it in that the Rev radio power module here. So we're going to unplug it from this side of the Rev radio power module and take that out of the robot. And then we, of course, have to plug the Ethernet cable that was there from our RoboRio back in. So everything is reconnected the way we need it to be connected. OK, and we have one final test to show us that everything is configured correctly. And then we will be all set with the setup, and it'll be time to start programming. So let's try it out. On our computers now, if you click on the wireless network, we can't do anything because, well, we disabled our wireless network. So I lost the window at some point. I don't know when that disappeared. But go ahead and open Internet and Network and Internet settings if you lost your window too. Remember, you have to click on Ethernet and then change adapter options. And that brings us back up to this window right here. And I'm going to go ahead and right-click and enable my Wi-Fi. Turn it back on. OK, and if you disabled other things that you want turned back on, you can. I'm going to leave my Bluetooth off just because I don't want to tempt fate. I don't think it will cause any problems, but I don't need it right now, so I'll leave it off. Now, find the wireless network that is your team number. And you should be able to just connect directly to it. I'm going to connect automatically. If you're not able to connect to your robot, if you're not able to drive your robot, if you're not able to download programs to your robot, the first thing you should check is that you are still connected to your robot's wireless network. If you are, then we have to move on with troubleshooting. If you're not, just reconnect to the Wi-Fi. Another thing, too, is when we did I'll pop my radio configuration utility open one more time. Forgot to mention this, but just say OK. All right. The WPA key here says optional. I did not put anything in. If you want to put a password on the wireless network for the robot, you can go ahead and put whatever you want your password to be here, the key to be here. And then when you connect to it, you'll have to type that in. It'll say you need to type this in. There's nobody else around. I'm not worried about other people connecting to it and causing problems. But if you're in an area where you are more concerned with any of those issues, then just go ahead and put a password on it. OK, now that we're connected, I want to run the last software that we had here, which is the FRC driver station. And we're going to say yes. And this, well, that was the, let's see. Your dashboard will probably pop up looking different. Let me swap mine back. So yours probably will look like, well, let me rerun it. So there are a few different dashboard types that you can use. We're going to end up switching to the smart dashboard here probably, but yes. There we go. But when you first run it for the very first time after everything is installed, okay, it doesn't want to pop it up. You might get another window that opens up. If it does, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Now, I am still connected to the wireless, but you can see down here we can't see anything. We're not connected to anything. And the first reason is that our team number is probably wrong. So right here, it says team number 3. I'm not team number 3. So we have to change that. This very first tab here on the left-hand side is what lets us kind of control the robot. We can set it into our different modes: teleoperated, autonomous, practice, test. You can enable and disable the robot here. You can also change which driver station you're pretending to be plugged into. You can see how much time is running. You can see your laptop's battery and your laptop's CPU usage. If you ever see this CPU usage percentage like at 100% for long periods of time, that might be a problem. That might cause your robot to start lagging. So it's just nice to see that. We can see our communication lights here, and you would see a robot battery voltage here if we were connected. And then we have error messages that will pop up over here. Then the second tab, this tab, it shows us kind of our communication pathway. You might see firewall stuff, and we'll go ahead and turn the firewalls off here in a second. Usually you want them turned off when you're working with the robot. We can also reboot the robot, the RoboRio, or restart the code. So sometimes if things lock up, you can use this to recover it. If we go down to our next tab, that's our setup tab. And here is where our team number is. So instead of 3, or whatever your team number might be at, change it to your team number. And now, immediately, look at that. I have a green communications light. I have voltage being reported from my battery. I also have a bunch of warnings, which, you know, is fine because we haven't actually put any program on it yet. So you might get all kinds of weird stuff over here. That's fine. One thing that's good to know is you can click this button above the warning messages and choose clear messages. So then you'll know if it's an old warning message or a new warning message if you're getting a lot of them. All right. Then the next tab down here is our joysticks. So you'll be able to connect joysticks here, and then you can drag them around to make them be whatever number we need them to be. So we'll talk more about that later. And then on our lightning bolt tab here, you can just see we have CAN data that you can track, but you know, we're not doing the CAN wiring. Obviously, there is a version of the program that uses CAN that you can switch to if you're interested in CAN. And we'll talk more about why you might want to do that when we get into the program. All right, but that is kind of the key here. So we are connected to the robot. That means our wireless network is working. That means our radio is set up correctly. It means that our RoboRio is set up correctly. And that means our robot is now ready for us to start programming. So we are done with our setup. We'll see you in the next video where we actually start programming. Before we go, another special thanks to First and Argosy Foundation for making this all possible.